Damas y caballeros, bienvenidos. Oh, wrong venue, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. Good evening and welcome to Town Hall. A very special presentation is awaiting us, and it's going to be regarding the beauty of our city of Alhambra, our own city. But first of all, we have to take care of some of the housekeeping items. So we're going to thank our electronic team, which is Ron, Joe, Steve, Sean, our greeters, Jean Ikemoto, Karen Taruya. And now, get ready with your hands so we can applaud for the birthdays that are coming up, okay? First one is Catherine Glyer, Patty Fry, Isabella Yang, Jean Furuda, Martha Bayer, Ted Lafford, Raymond Narusawa, Gloria Perkins, Ana Yalid Rojas, Francis Lau, Ruth Yamamoto, and Yuriko Livingston. It seems that the only person we have here tonight is actually Jean Furuda. So let's applaud. And, okay. So happy birthday for the days to come, and actually starts tomorrow. Now I'm going to be turning the mic over to Helen. She will be presenting our new residents, William and Doris Chin.
Good evening, everybody. Good evening. I'm so happy that I can introduce to you Bill and Doris Chin. And they have just recently moved into the one of the cottages over on Melody Lane. And they've only been here a month, but they are getting well organized and oriented to Atherton. So we're happy to have them here. So Bill was born and raised in San Francisco. And he did his early schooling there. And then he went to UC Berkeley, graduated from that. Then he attended the Osteopathic Medical School in Missouri. Then he studied cardiology. Wow. And then and that was in Cleveland, in the Cleveland Clinic. And he became a Christian in Cleveland. And then he did a year of research in San Francisco, and that is where he met his wife, where he met Doris. And they were married in 1991. So Bill has worked for Kaiser for 25 years in Fontana, and he's retired now, and we're so happy that he's here. Now, Doris was born in Hangzhou, China, and she's one of 7 children, and they were all girls. So she went to school in China and in Hong Kong, and then when she graduated from high school, she was able to come to the United States and study in a small college in Texas. Women's College in Texas. And she became a Christian there. By the first Thanksgiving that she was in Texas, she became a Christian. Then she felt called to Christian ministry and decided to go to Southwest Baptist Theological Seminary in Fort Worth. And she got her degree in Master's in Religious Education. She went to Chicago and she worked for a campus ministry in 5 different colleges. And then back to school again. She went to Wheaton Graduate School, and she studied clinical psychology. And then she came to San Francisco. California was the only state that would give a license for marriage and family counseling, and that's what she wanted. So she came to San Francisco, and guess who she met? So she met Bill, and they were married in 1991. Now, these two have one daughter, and she lives in the house that they left back in Walnut. So she's in their house in Walnut. They attend a vibrant church in Walnut. They're involved in Bible studies, small groups, mission ministry, outreach. And on Tuesday, like today, Doris came here to BSF, and Bill did a Bible study on Zoom. So Bill likes classical music. They both enjoy Bible reading and connecting with people. And so we're happy to have them, and I'll let Doris say a word.
We felt so blessed and privileged to be able to come here. When we first time enter into this campus, we already felt that's the place we need to spend our stage of life. That's the best place we could come. So since we came, you want to say what you said? I forgot what you said.
What I said is Doris is warmer, so they gave her the mic. But no, I think that some people said we should be like Barnabas, which the name is son of encouragement, right? And yeah, he fought with Paul a little bit, but this is how I feel. This is like lots of sons and daughters of encouragement in this campus.
You know, our pastor teach us at this time, learn to grow old gracefully and prepare to meet your Creator. So I said, oh, we got here. Now we are younger, we can learn so much encouragement from all of you. So I bless God for that. We're so happy to be here.
These guys love the Lord, and we are so glad that they are here. Let's give them a warm welcome.
Now to introduce our guest, Gary Fruholz. He's a native of Alhambra, who works locally for Engel and Volkers Real Estate in San Marino. Gary is a Christian and member of the First Baptist Church of Alhambra. Gary is married to Valeska Fruholz, and they have two grown children, Ellie and Mario. Gary is very active in the local community. Get ready for the listing, okay? He has been a member of the Atherton Board of Trustees, past president of the Rotary Club of Alhambra, a City of Alhambra Planning Commissioner, member of the Tournament of Roses, volunteer at the California Railway Museum in Perris, California, and member of the Alhambra Library Board of Trustees. Gary and Valeska enjoy traveling, jogging, and various sports. Gary is an avid surfer. One of Gary's favorite verses of the Bible is Proverbs 3:5-6. Trust in the Lord with all of your heart, and lean not on your own understanding. In all of your ways, acknowledge him, and he will make your paths straight. Let's put our hands together and welcome Gary. He was my realtor.
I did that so well. Let's see, do I speak here? Can you hear me? Okay. First of all, thank you for having me here today. It's a pleasure to be presenting to you here at Atherton. And being that I've been a member of First Baptist across the street, I've always known and had an understanding of Atherton and an appreciation of the wonderful people here. And the sense of community here is very, very warm, very welcoming, and I feel lucky to be taken in as part of it for a get-together like this and being also on the Board of Trustees. Thank you. And as Bertha was title here says Alhambra Vignettes. A vignette is a story or a short episode. And hopefully by looking at these different pieces of the puzzle of Alhambra, we can put it together and get kind of a little bit of a picture of the history of Alhambra. Alhambra has been around since the 1870s. It was incorporated in 1903. So there's a rich, rich history with the city of Alhambra that we live in. Some of the names you probably know, or is the name Wilson. When you look up toward the mountains, you see Mount Wilson. And it's named in honor of Benjamin Wilson. And Benjamin Wilson was one of these high energy people that just seemed to have his hands in everything. Wilson he was a land baron, he developed land, he was the founder of Wilson College, which ultimately worked its way into being USC. And he had two daughters. And they were impressed with a book called Tales of the Alhambra. And it was written by Washington Irving. Now, going across the church across the street, I saw the street Washington. And I thought, oh, how nice. They named it after George Washington. And it was only recently that I figured out the street right next to it was Irving. So it's really, these two streets are named in honor of Washington Irving. And Irving himself is one of the great American authors. He wrote Rip Van Winkle, Legend of Sleepy Hollow. He wrote a book called Tales of the Alhambra. If you were an artist in the early to mid-1800s, one of the places you wanted to visit was Spain. That's where artists went. And he spent a few years there, and he writes a book called Tales of the Alhambra. And in Alhambra, this area that we call Alhambra now, during the 1870s, Wilson is starting to develop real estate, and he's starting to put together a housing tract. And his two daughters are reading this romantic book about Tales of the Alhambra. And they're saying to him, Daddy, you ought to name this new area after this romantic book we're reading called Tales of the Alhambra. And one of the daughters then has the good fortune to marry into a very prominent real estate family in the San Gabriel Valley. And the name of that family is Patton. And they then have a son, and they name him George S. Patton, after his father. And he then is the general. So, you know, younger people love to talk about degrees of separation. And you certainly can see that here, that Wilson and the Patton family then are connected through Ruth. When you go to, do any of you know of Church of Our Savior on Roses Road? Mm-hmm. It's a beautiful Gothic church. It's an Episcopal church. And that was the church that the Patton family worshiped in. And when you go there, you'll see that they have a monument to George Patton. And also, when you go inside the church, they have magnificent stained glass windows. And four of the windows are Patton windows that the family paid for. One of them pays tribute to George S. Patton. And when you look closely at that stained glass window, you then see George S. Patton in his military uniform in a tank. This is probably about the only stained glass window in a church anywhere where you can see a general in a tank. But you'll see that at the Church of Our Savior. And when you consider Alhambra and the names that are incorporated into the city, many of the names then emanate out of Tales of the Alhambra. Of course, the name. And one of the jokes is Main Street on Alhambra initially was named Boabdil. Boabdil was the last Moorish ruler in the Spanish area in the 1490s. He became a puppet ruler. But he, though, originally Main Street is named after Boabdil, and it doesn't last too long because it's very difficult to say, and they changed it to Main Street. Some of the other streets, you have Granada, you have Alhambra Road. Linda Raxa Park is on the east side of Alhambra. Linda Raxa is the garden that you then approach the Alhambra in Spain through. Vega Street, Almanzor again is an Arabian princess. And to give you a little context of the city of Alhambra, Wilson starts developing it in the 1870s. It goes until 1903 before it's incorporated. In 1903 it's incorporated, and part of that is that we then have our own police department, our own fire department, our own school system, and maybe most importantly, we got our own water system. But Alhambra will add acreage to the city 26 times over a period. And when Alhambra starts out in 1903, it's 1,500 acres. It runs roughly from Margarita, and right there is adjacent to the railroad tracks, and then the east side, and then you'd have Huntington Drive. In 1908, it adds then nearly 2,000 more acres to the west end of the city, and it continues adding with 24 different additions. The final addition comes in 1963, a little sliver of land over by Cal State LA on the east side of the 710 freeway. And the city of Los Angeles just said, take it, it's on the wrong side of the freeway. And with that, Alhambra reached its acreage that it now has of about 8,400 acres. To understand Alhambra, when you really want to start understanding Alhambra, think of railroads and water. Those are two key perspectives of Alhambra that really give you an idea of where it's been and how it formed the way it did. You've heard of the Big Four: Hopkins, Crocker, Stanford, and Huntington building the Central Pacific Railroad. As soon as they finished that, they started dreaming about getting down to Texas and Louisiana. And what they did was they then made another railroad, they called it the Southern Pacific, and it came right through here. And it was the second transcontinental railroad. There was James Hill in the northern part of our country would have the Great Northern, and the Northern Pacific would soon after that complete transcontinental lines. But this thing was the second transcontinental route through the United States. And there's another name. If you drive around Alhambra, you'll see a street called Shorb Street. And James DeVarth Shorb marries into the Wilson family. And he has an engineering flair, and he's a hydrologist. He's very good at digging down, establishing wells, which is exactly what you need when you're going to be developing a piece of real estate. So Alhambra has that second transcontinental line coming through town. It was at grade at that time. Probably about 30 years ago, they lowered it into the trench. But there's these sidings that come up Alhambra, and one goes up Raymond toward Pasadena. And the Southern Pacific has another subsidiary called the Pacific Electric, which had what was called the red cars. And right here, you see a Pacific Electric red car. Anyone want to guess where that's at? I hear some people have an inclination, I think, but
Huntington and Fremont?
you got it. Joe gets, I don't know what, what you get is, Bertha told me to remind everyone there is candy from fossil mints there. Joe gets the first pick, candy from fossil mints, and you all are welcome to take as much as you can put into your pockets. But yeah, when you're on Huntington Drive, you say, isn't that lovely that they planned this wide median so people can go jogging on it in grass? That's where the Pacific Electric was. This was the main route into the San Gabriel Valley. And as you can see at Fremont, you have 4 tracks right there. Those two are then going up Fair Oaks, and then also where Oak Knoll is, they had two more tracks that branched off, and this went all the way out toward Monrovia. That's a picture of the Southern Pacific Station that was at Palm and Mission. The significance also for this transcontinental railroad going through was it was a big-time railroad. And Alhambra then develops an industrial facility and neighborhood section of the city in the southwest corner that's then adjacent to Fremont and Mission. But the reason it develops there is because you have a railroad that can be bringing freight in, taking freight out. Some of the notable companies that were right at that area by Fremont and Mission would be the C.F. Braun Corporation. Anybody, does that ring any bells? Yeah. Braun was a big petrochemical company. They made these massive equipment that would be used with refining petroleum. They could put it onto a flat car, they could take it down to San Pedro, put it on a boat, and ship it out. But the reason Alhambra was appealing to Braun was the proximity to the railroad and the transportation, that you could take these big, heavy pieces of equipment. The Vinnell Corporation was located in that section of Alhambra. Joe, what is the Vinnell Corporation known for? I got you, okay. Vinnell was the prime contractor for Dodger Stadium. And you say, oh, well, Walter O'Malley would go only with the very finest companies that knew how to build stadiums. Vinnell built one baseball park, and that was Dodger Stadium, and that was it. And you say, well, that's kind of odd. The reason that occurs the way it does is Walter O'Malley, the owner of the Dodgers, is not only a sharp lawyer, he was trained as an engineer. He, in the 1950s, is enthralled with this new material called concrete and how it's being used. So he figures, if I want my stadium built out of concrete, don't I go to some company that knows concrete inside and out? Vinnell was then known for building freeways and airport runways. They knew concrete inside out. So Walter O'Malley hires this company that knows concrete but doesn't have really a history building baseball parks. And the only knock on it was they didn't have enough water fountains when they opened it up. But anyway, the concrete on it has done well over the years. The Alhambra Foundry was down there too. As a little kid growing up in Alhambra, I'd ride my bike down there and you'd have these big vats of molten metal being poured and sparks flying all over the place. I thought only in Pittsburgh you had something like that. Alhambra had its own foundry. If you look at manhole covers, so often you'll see Alhambra Foundry on it. There are ghosts of the Alhambra railroads as you go through the city too. If you go by Alhambra Park, you still will see the tracks that have been paved over on the line that went up to Pasadena. And where Target is, that area was inhabited by the San Gabriel Winery, which for a while claimed to be the largest winery in the world. So you had a lot of wine coming out of this area too. And this is over at Story Park. Are you guys familiar with Story Park? How it goes down a hill, and there's actually a wash there that used to be a stream. But it's bisected by this nice road, Woodward. And you thought, how nice that, the land just was that way. That was a Pacific Electric line that ran out to Duarte, and that's where a bridge was. If you go to Story Park, you can then see the timbers that used to hold the bridge in place. As it started to fail, they started dumping dirt on it to hold it in place. And that's how then Woodward works its way across Story Park. Since we're on transportation, Alhambra actually had an airport. It was over by New and Valley Boulevard. the 1920s and 30s. It was a substantial airport. It was the home of Western Airlines, their headquarters. It also had the largest repair facility in the world. So it was a substantial airport. And it was in competition with Burbank. LAX really hadn't made an impact at that time. And an event occurs in the 1940s that essentially wipes out the Alhambra Airport. And that's World War II. The Burbank Airport in the 1930s has this new company that's just starting out. The name of the company is Lockheed. And with World War II, Lockheed goes ballistic. They constantly have activity coming in and out. Burbank becomes bigger and bigger and bigger, and the Alhambra Airport kind of falls by the wayside. And LAX is starting to make an impact too. And there were movies made at Alhambra. There was Clark Gable. You can see some of the movies that were made there. One of the movies was a movie called Hotel Hollywood. And you can actually get Hotel Hollywood at the Alhambra Museum and look at it. And at the beginning of it, you actually get to see the Alhambra Airport. Now, I'll try to play the video right now so you can see it. But what you're going to see is, with Hotel Hollywood was about a young man coming from St. Louis to Hollywood to become famous, and it doesn't quite work out that way. But anyway, this is his send-off at St. Louis. So the Alhambra Airport has a sign that says St. Louis, but it's Alhambra Airport. And Benny Goodman is leading a parade down a street. That street is Valley Boulevard. And when you look at it, you will see just fields of crops being grown. So take a look. Let's see if I can't get it starting up now. Let's see here. I don't have the sound to it, but they're going along, actually, Valley Boulevard. That is Valley Boulevard there. They come into the parking lot of the airport. And then they're going to march through the lobby of the airport. So you're going to see what the Alhambra Airport actually looked like. And that's the inside of the Alhambra Airport. Along with the railroads, water was a big, as we found out again today in Rotary. Brett's a member of Rotary, like I am. And our guest speaker was Dr. Steve Placida, who's on the water board. So we were again reminded the significance of water. The quote up here is kind of good. Thousands have lived lives without love, not one without water. W.H. Auden made that quote, but it's true. And Shorb, the son-in-law of Wilson, is really in charge of the wells, and he establishes a well system for Alhambra. And right now, I believe we have 10 wells. But the significance of that was that our city never was a ward to other cities, bigger cities like Los Angeles. We could be independent because we had our water. There's a large aquifer in the San Gabriel Valley. In the San Fernando Valley, there really isn't a large aquifer. So they had to go with the various dams that William Mulholland constructed to get water into the San Fernando Valley. But Shorb establishes a water district company. as we put these little pieces of the puzzle together, Alhambra had its own artist alley, and it was on the east side of town on Champion Place. And a number of very noted artists would go there. One of them was Norman Rockwell. Norman Rockwell would spend most of his winters in Alhambra to get away from the cold weather. And he had been introduced really to Saturday Evening Post by Clyde Forsyth, who was a very noted artist of that time and who lived in Alhambra. So Forsyth introduces Rockwell to Alhambra. And if you go to the Forsyth home is, don't knock on the door, but anyway, it's 522 North Almancer, which is a lovely little section in our city with some very, very nice homes. And if you go around on Alhambra Road, look at the garage, the structure up top is where Rockwell would actually be spending his winters. So when you see those little skinny kids on the Rockwell paintings, they're not from the Midwest, they're Alhambra kids. And if you go to Champion Place on the east side of town, now you'd see on the other side of where the little wash and river used to be, you'll see Jack in the Box. But it was a magnificent view of the mountains, because you had then what's called the Alhambra Wash down here. It used to be a stream. There weren't houses there. You were looking at the San Gabriel Mountains. So it really was a very logical place where artists would gather. Some of the artists that were there, not only were Rockwell and Forsyth, but if you know the world of art in Southern California, these names would resonate with you. Frank Tenney Johnson, Jack Smith. These, if you go to YouTube, you can see some of the work they've done. If you've ever gone to the Pageant of the Masters in Laguna Beach, you'll see some of their paintings being reconstructed there. And right adjacent to 520 is 500 North Almancer. And this house was used in filming Father of the Bride. Alhambra's had a lot of filming here because our proximity to Hollywood makes it agreeable in that manner. And Father of the Bride, the driveway scenes and the backyard scenes were filmed then at the Almancer home. And if you go up the street, Almancer becomes El Molino. Weirdly enough, in Pasadena, at 843 South El Molino, you have the house that was used in the front for the filming of Father of the Bride. Another movie that was filmed here in Alhambra is the movie Halloween. Have any of you ever seen that? It's kind of a chilling movie. But it was filmed at my grammar school. In the beginning of the movie, the evil person in it is walking through the hallways of the school. And it was just a weird feeling to see the hallways that I knew as a kid into this really spooky movie. Alhambra, as Raylene and I were just talking earlier, Alhambra used to have a country club. And the country club was located between Ramona and it would be Atlantic, moving southwest. And Alhambra has historic districts now. And that area is called the Midwick Tract. And it was the Midwick Country Club. The word Midwick and Renee, where is Renee? She was here, I thought. She probably would be with Eddie. But Midwick is an English word that I kidded Eddie about. It means midway. And with the Pacific Electric, it was midway because the Pacific had another track that went along what now is the middle of the San Bernardino Freeway. And it stopped and then it curved up to Pasadena. But the Midwick tract had a lovely polo and golf club. And some of the people that played at the golf club would be Walt Disney, Will Rogers, George S. Patton, Spencer Tracy, and King George even played there. It was considered really about the best polo field in the Los Angeles area. They also had a golf course. Some of the motion pictures that were filmed there, because you had the ability, you had horse stables there. So you would have movies with horses. So National Velvet was filmed there. And then also The Adventures of Robin Hood with Errol Flynn was filmed in Alhambra. Alhambra and its polo field also made international headlines in another kind of dark sort of way. And this gets into one of the urban legends of Alhambra. But there was going to be a match. It was in 1938 or 39, between a United States All-Star team and the All-Star team from Britain. And the Brits had some military people on their polo team. And it was a very close contest. And what happens during it is one of the British players, Pat Rourke, his horse rears up and falls on him. And yet it happens after the polo match is concluded. So the question is, what was going on there that would happen after the polo match? And actually, we made Time magazine. And Time magazine, if you went back and saw this, which I did, it started out saying, mourned on 4 continents last week was Irish-born Captain Charles Thomas Irvine Rourke, retired British Army officer considered one of the great polo players, was killed when his horse fell on him. So Alhambra makes international news with that. So how in the world does that happen? What you'll see in the following slide is what was reported is that there was a duel between an American polo player and then the British player Rourke. And the American player had the name Pedley. And here's where the urban legend kicks in with the old-timers of Alhambra. And the urban legend is that somehow they were so inflamed with one another because they've been guarding them the way they do in a basketball game. And after it, Rourke then challenges Pedley to a duel. Rourke's a military guy. Pedley doesn't know what he's doing, but he doesn't know how to say no either. But yet, like some of these duels, they really don't fire at each other, they just fire a gun. Rourke goes and fires his gun, but he's not riding his regular military horse. The horse rears up and falls on him. That is the urban legend of what happened. But people, when they lay it out, if you go into the Midwick track, the intersection of Rourke and Pedley is an intersection. All the streets in Midwick are named after polo players and golfers. But they played up the duel between the two by having the intersection of Rourke and Pedley. If you go, and this is from the Los Angeles Times, and again it says here, it talks about the tragedy. Top British star Pat Rourke was killed in 1939 when his pony rolled over him during a duel with Pedley. And this was then in the Los Angeles Times. So again, the urban legend is fueled by the way it's reported. I called, when I did a story on this, I called the American Association of Polo and asked them if they knew anything about that, and they said, no, we don't. One of the other points of interest, or historically, is what's called the Pyrenees Castle. Whoops. And the Pyrenees Castle is in the southwest corner of Alhambra in this section that's called the Alhambra Hills. And it was constructed by a man named Dupuy. Dupuy then comes to the United States in the early 1990s, and he's going to make his fortune. He's going to make his fortune by being a sheep herder. Anyway, he doesn't make a fortune being a sheep herder. But to be a good sheep herder, what you had to do was buy a lot of land. So he spends a couple decades not being a very good sheep herder. But in the 1920s, the American economy takes off and that land becomes very, very valuable. And he starts to really finally make some money. And what he does is he constructs a castle that reminds him of the Pyrenees Mountains, what he would see as a boy growing up in southern France. And it's a lovely facility. It gained, though, kind of infamy with Phil Spector, the music producer living there, and actually then shooting someone. If you remember that, that happened probably about 20 years ago, and he was convicted of it and died in prison. Spector was a character, and when he buys that home, the Pyrenees Castle in the 1990s, I knew one of the people that represented him in the purchase. Spector says publicly, "I bought myself a beautiful and enchanting castle in a hick town where there is no place to go that you shouldn't." But that tells you a little bit about Alhambra. We have kind of a wholesome reputation here too. Spector bought this because it wasn't really right in Hollywood, but it was close to it. You've all heard of the San Gabriel Mission. When you look at the San Gabriel Mission, right here, you see the side of it. And it has a great resemblance to then the Moorish fortress in Cordoba, Spain. And also the San Gabriel Mission really architecturally is completely different from all other missions in California. It looks like a fortress. You have very small windows, they're narrow and high. That's called a buttress. That gives a lot of foundational support to the walls, and it has a great deal in common with the Moorish fortress in Cordoba, Spain. The Catholic priest in charge of its construction, his name was Cruzado, was raised in Cordoba, Spain. So it turns out, his idea of what a mission ought to look like is what he saw when he grew up in Spain. And then it manifests itself in that way. So here's a question. What do Mickey Cohen, how many know the name Mickey Cohen? Okay. Mickey Cohen was a hood, he was a mafia guy, and he was a tough guy, and he was well known in Los Angeles. As a little kid, I can remember hearing about Mickey Cohen. He'd always be in the news for doing something. But Norman Rockwell and Mickey Cohen had something in common, and that is they loved Fosselman's ice cream. I interviewed, and it's actually they loved Leo's ice cream, and the history of Leo's ice cream as a kid growing up when our Little League team won, sometimes we'd be lucky enough to be taken to Leo's for ice cream. The individual that starts Leo's ice cream, I think his name was Anderson. Yeah. And his first name is Leo Anderson. He worked at Fosselman's. And like a lot of times he says, I know what I'm doing. I'm going to go and then start an ice cream place across the street 2 blocks away from Fosselman's. Leo's does so well that Fosselman's in the 60s and 70s closes down before it comes back. But I spoke to people that had worked at Leo's, and they talked about Mickey Cohen coming in. And he would drive in a really beautiful car. He'd have some of his other guys in suits. He'd be in a suit, and they would order ice cream. And they'd usually have a woman in the car, too. Here are some of the famous Alhambrans. And this, again, will give you a kind of an idea of Alhambra. Cheryl Teagues is an Alhambra. She went to Alhambra High School. And I had interviewed Alhambra had a very good baton squad back then. So I interviewed the individual that was the leader of the baton squad, and it was obvious she was very pretty, and it was obvious she was about 5'0". But she told stories. She said, yeah, Cheryl and I were always going to these model interviews, and Cheryl always got the job. because Cheryl was tall. She was 5'10". They really liked people being taller. Another famous Alhambra is Ralph Kiner. Ralph Kiner held the National League record for home runs, 56, until Mark McGuire and Barry Bonds then broke the record in the late 1990s. But he was an Alhambra. Here we have Ralph Kiner, and who does that look like? That's Liz Taylor. Ralph Kiner and Liz Taylor, are at the premiere of 12 O'Clock High at Gregory Peck movie. What is Ralph Kiner, an Alhambra guy, doing with Liz Taylor? Brett, who historically was one of the owners of the Pittsburgh Pirates?
Oh gosh, I know this.
It was Bing Crosby. Bing Crosby loved horses and baseball, but he was one of the owners of the Pittsburgh Pirates. Ralph Kiner played for the Pittsburgh Pirates. So you want to keep your star happy, right? And if you're Bing Crosby, you set him up with this young actress.
Yep.
So there is his date with Liz Taylor. Now I'm a member of the Tournament of Roses. So we have all sorts of different jobs we do the day before the parade, and I'm doing barricade work one night. And one of the people with me is the cousin of Ralph Kiner. So we're talking all night long. And he gives me the true story of the date with Liz Taylor. And you have to remember, Ralph Kiner's an Alhambra guy. So he always loved Cadillacs. So he picks Liz Taylor up. She's living with her parents at that time. And then they go to the premiere in Hollywood. But he's an Alhambra guy. He sees that, they have chauffeurs there, and he thinks to himself, I'm not going to pay for tipping some chauffeur. We're going to go and park, 2 blocks down and just walk. So they walk in like that, and then when he comes out, he then says to the valets, can you get my car? And the valet says, if we didn't take it there, we're not going to pick it up for you. You got to walk to it. So he and Liz Taylor walked 2 blocks down the street to the car, and Ralph's cousin was saying, yeah, Ralph just said you could hear her breathing more and more deeply as we started walking along Hollywood Boulevard to where the car went. And that was the only date Ralph Kiner and Liz Taylor. That is Jim Gennard. When I go to Garfield Grammar School, the older guys are cool because they're older. Jim Gennard is one of the cool guys. He's older. But I always knew the name, Jim Gennard. He goes to high school, he goes to college. After college, he really likes motocross. So what he does is he's starting to sell motocross goggles out of the back of his car at motocross events. And it kind of catches him, he's selling some of these. And people say to him, can you ever do anything like that for skiing? So he starts adapting that cool motocross look to ski goggles. And they look really good. And then he says, well, I just ought to go and take it a little bit further and make regular sunglasses. But as he's doing this, he says, I need to brand my product. How do I brand my product? Well, he has a dog. So he says, I'm going to name my product after my dog. The name of his dog is Oakley. And that's the biggest. Jim sold Oakley sunglasses for over $2 billion. Not million, $2 billion. And Jim didn't buy just mansions. Jim bought islands in the South Pacific on top of the places at Malibu. But when you hear about Oakley, it's a kid that started out at Garfield Grammar School and Alhambra High School. Right there is Dwayne Allen. The Allen family was just an institution in Alhambra during the 1950s. Dwayne would wind up being a pro football player, starting in for the Los Angeles Rams. And during the off season, he liked music, so he would have a rock and roll band that would entertain at the schools that I would go hear. So I thought, this guy has the coolest life of anyone around. He's a football player and in a rock and roll band during the off season. As I researched the Allen family, the entire family was amazing. Allen's father was a commercial pilot who set a record for going across the United States time-wise with a co-pilot. And because he was black, they didn't let him pilot in commercial planes. But he worked for Boeing, and he would shuttle their planes all over the place because they trusted him very much, and he was a very good professional pilot. There were 3 other boys in the family. One of the other boys is on the pit crew for A.J. Foyt and Parnelli Jones. The other one becomes an educator and has a doctorate. The other one becomes a musician. It's an amazing story. The family did very well. And in interviews that had been done with one of the brothers, he made a comment that they felt they were kind of lucky to be raised in Alhambra because they didn't really face some of the ugly experiences that Black Americans did in other cities. And when you talk to people that went to Alhambra High in the 50s, Dwayne Allen was a real popular guy and everybody's buddy and friend. And he would come back. And the only crazy thing was he went, after his pro days were over, he became a coach at Mark Keppel, which was the arch rival of Alhambra. And this is Stan Freberg. Stan Freberg went to Alhambra High School. He was a very noted comic. He entertained on Ed Sullivan, The Tonight Show. He was in Mad Mad World. And he took over the Jack Benny show on the radio. But it was another Alhambra High alumni. I recently did a story on Mac 5. At Granada and Main Street, there was a McDonald's. It was the 5th McDonald's constructed. And when I called back to the headquarters in Chicago, they immediately, when I gave them the address, they said, that's Mac 5. They knew all about it. And as the 5th, I can remember the original McDonald's they had there. They didn't have any interior space for it. They had a very simple menu for it. And back then, it was like a 15-cent hamburger. But this is the final building permit I pulled at City Hall on the construction of this. It came online in September of 1953. The final building permit that they request says right here, they're requesting on this permit steel arches decorative attached to building. So the final building permit put the steel, the golden arches in, which was something that they improvised at the last moment. There we go. We got I'll try to be very quick on the final little slides here. Where Target is, they used to have horse stables. And there was a Chrysler dealership owned by a man named Crevlin, and he loved horses. And he actually had a horse that won the Kentucky Derby. If you talk to anyone about horses, they will know that Determined, that was housed here in Alhambra, in the stables that are where Target is, then won the 1954 Kentucky Derby. And the thing about Determined was, it was what they call a blue horse. It had a grayish blue coat. That was the first grayish blue coat to win. It was a very small horse. And the joke was that Crevlin, when he buys a horse that's noticeably small, the person that sold him says, "You want me just to take it back? It's so small, it's a run." He says, "No, I'll keep it. You never know, it might win the Kentucky Derby." And that's the Vanell Corporation that built Dodger Stadium. We talked a little bit about that. If you go to Alhambra Road and Chapel, you have then the Carmel of St. Teresa, which is a Carmelite. The nuns there engage in very serious and constant prayer, and it's a unique building, and only rarely do they even open it up. And Alhambra actually used to have a heliport where the golf course is now, and they had Los Angeles Airways, which was going to be the largest private helicopter company in the United States. It operated from the early 60s to 1968, and unfortunately it had 2 crashes at that time, but it went from LAX to Alhambra to El Monte to Disneyland. So hopefully from all of this, you can start putting these vignettes, you can start putting together a little bit of a picture of Alhambra, that we have a rich history. It's a really pretty wholesome history that Phil Spector never really fit into. And our history shows a lot of the progress that our country made. You had it with railroads going through, you had the water wars and extracting water from the ground that gave you a certain degree of independence. And you had a lot of wholesome, good people that came out of Alhambra. So hopefully you now understand Alhambra a little bit better than an hour ago. So thank you very much.
Sean? So now, do we feel so special to be living in this city? Wow, we're proud. Now we said, oh, we have so many people, important people, and we live in Alhambra. Proud. And we're going to thank Gary. And actually, we're going to say good luck in your upcoming Tournament of Roses. He's going to be very, very involved. He has been with them for 22 years. And he will be very involved, so he's going to be doing a lot of work. And we'll hear from you once you finish, or invite us to any of the functions, or tell us about him, so we can make him. But
We'll be in touch.
okay, well, thank you so much, and how about a applause for him? And thank you all for coming. Help yourselves to some of that candy on your way out from this special place, and thank you.